You are welcome to Opokuwari School's e-learning program. I'm Kofi Akio. I'll be taking you for economics. Today we would want to treat the topic consumer behavior or the theory of utility. In fact, the theory of utility is used to explain the concept of demand in economics, as the theory of production buttresses the theory of supply. With the theory of consumer behavior or the theory of utility, we would want to know how the consumer maximizes utility or satisfaction as a result of consumption, as a result of enjoying any form of service. Of course, as individuals, we enjoy some services. As consumers too, we buy goods. Dependent on this, we don't waste our money. Yes, we don't waste our money. At any point in time, we would want to make the best use or the best satisfaction from any money we spent out. And so we say that the consumer many a times would want to maximize satisfaction. And I would want to highlight on certain terminologies as we proceed. Utility simply means satisfaction. Utility simply means satisfaction. But in economics we deal with certain terminologies, and so we are no longer using the normal day English satisfaction. Rather, we are using the technical term utility. Utility simply means satisfaction. We believe that at any point in time, individuals would want to go to the market and purchase goods and services. But in so doing, they would want to gain some satisfaction. And here I would want to refer to the technical term utility. They would want to make some utility from any consumption that they enjoy from. And so we believe that for that individual who is thirsty, that individual thirsty would want to get some water to quench his or her thirst. And in quenching the thirst, we believe that he or she is gaining some level of satisfaction from there. Also, that individual who is hungry would not want to be only drinking water. Of course, if you are hungry, it means that you need food. So this individual would also want to consume food to gain satisfaction, and for that matter, utility. But let me tell you this, to an individual who is willing to die, you see that poison will give that individual some level of satisfaction. And so we believe that people do not actually waste their scarce resources anyway, anyhow, but they would want to spend, they would want to let go of their last penny because it would give them some level of satisfaction. There are two schools of thought. Two schools of thought who address the theory of utility. One of them is the cardinalist school of thought. And the other is the ordinalist school of thought. Much of our attention will be centered on the cardinalist school of thought. And actually, the cardinalist school believe that utility can be measured. Or they say that utility is measurable. They use nominal numbers. They use figures to be able to elaborate or expatiate on the theory of utility. And according to the cardinalists, they would want to attribute numbers. And so assuming I take in a glass of water, I can be in the position to tell somebody that I have gained, say, 100 units. But over there, the unit of their measurement, unit of measuring utility according to the cardinalist is known as utils. And so we know that in the physical sciences, energy is measured in joules. and force is measured in newtons. According to the cardinalist school of thought, utility is measurable, and they measure utility in terms of utils. And so, assuming you take in, say, a bowl of rice, a bowl of banku, a plate of whatever you are taking, a glass of whatever you are taking, you would want to attribute numbers to them. If you are attributing numbers to the satisfaction you are gaining from that consumption, then it means that you are going about it through the cardinalist theory. The ordinalist theory, they try to measure utility, or they would want to rank utility, or they would want to compare utility. And by ranking utility, they would want to compare two things. I prefer this one to that one. Ranking utility, I prefer Opokuwari School to Prempeh College. I prefer St. Louis to Yasantoa, etc., etc. If that is the case, then you are going about utility through the ordinalist theory. So the ordinalists, like I was saying, they try to rank or compare utility. But much of our attention, so far as the theory of consumer behavior or the theory of utility is concerned, will be centered on the cardinalist theory or the cardinalist school of thought. Okay, and so like I said earlier, my second terminology will be on utils, and utils here will be the standard unit for measuring utility. Utils is the standard unit for measuring utility. So if you are going about utility by the cardinalist theory, here, assuming you take in a bowl of rice, instead of writing just 100, 20, 40, 1,000, etc., you end up by writing 100 utils, 1,000 utils, etc., etc. Okay, the third terminology I would want to talk about is total utility. Total utility into bracket TU. Like the word total means overall, or the sum of whatever thing you are consuming. Mind you, I told you that by utility, much emphasis is on the consumer. Utility buttresses the theory of demand. Utility explains the concept of demand. So anything we are doing here is about the connection the consumer has in purchasing or consuming a commodity. And so by the term total utility can be expatiated as the overall satisfaction a consumer gets from consuming a commodity. Assuming you are taking in, say, 3 cups of water. With these 3 cups of water, we want to sum them all. Summing them all will give us the total utility. So total utility is the overall satisfaction a consumer gets from consuming a commodity. Dependent on that, of course, in economics, anything we would want to measure because of the element of econometrics and as well as statistics. So here, one of the measurements of, or one of the ways through which total utility can be measured is through TU at a certain consumption. TUN, the N represents the number of units of the commodity you are consuming. So say total utility at number 1, total utility at number 2. So the N here actually is the generalized formula of expressing total utility or expressing any concept of utility. So TUN will be equal to AUN times QN. That is, if you want to calculate total utility at the first unit or at quantity 1, you consider the average utility at quantity 1, then you multiply it by quantity 1. That is the average utility of consuming the first unit of a commodity multiplied by quantity 1. The same thing applies to total utility 2. TU2 is average utility of consuming the second unit of the commodity multiplied by the second quantity of the commodity. So like I was saying earlier, The n is the generalized way of expressing the formula, and dependent on the n, any level or any number of total utility you would want to consider, you insert the number there, and it affects all the n's over there by inserting the identical number in there. Of course, this is not the only formula for total utility. Another formula for total utility is TUN equals sigma MUN. Of course, this sign is known as summation. We have seen our n here again. So in calculating for TU at quantity 1, I've earlier said that the n represents the number of units of the commodities that we are consuming. So TU at quantity 1, it means that let us sum the marginal utilities up to quantity 1. And you know that before consuming quantity 1, it means that we had earlier on consumed nothing. We hadn't consumed anything. So when we want to calculate the total utility at quantity 1, it means that we need to start from 0. But if you haven't consumed anything, it presupposes to mean that the utility will be 0. So we can start our formula by saying that TU1 will be equal to MU0 plus MU1. I will reiterate, or I'll re-emphasize on this. If you want to calculate TU up to a certain n, sum up the marginal utilities up to that n. That is, if you want to calculate TU up to number 1 or TU at number 1, sum up the marginal utilities up to number 1. And you and I, we know that from before we get to 1, we are from 0. But the 0 means that we haven't consumed anything. And if we haven't consumed anything, it means that the satisfaction will be 0. There wouldn't be any satisfaction or utility for the consumer to gain. So it presupposes to mean that TU1 will be equal to 0 plus MU1. That is, TU1 will be equal to MU1. I believe you are following. Take note of some of these things, because some of us, we are expecting the theory of utility to be one of the concept or one of the data response question in the coming exams. So it behooves you guys to be able to, understand some of these things better. Okay. Then we move on to the fourth term, or the fourth terminology, which is average utility. Average utility is AU. The word average basically is the mean, average utility. And so here we would want to find the mean of the various quantities of the commodities we are consuming. And by the mean, it means that we add the total utilities, the various values that comes out, then we divide by the various observations. It presupposes to mean that average utility is the utility per unit of the quantity of a commodity consumed. The utility per unit of the quantity of a commodity consumed. Mathematically, you know that anytime there is per, then it means that we are dividing. So utility per unit of the quantity of a commodity consumed is known as average utility. That is, generally, we can write the formula for average utility as AUN is equal to TUN over QN. That is, at any point in time, the observation or the quantity we would actually want to calculate, we put the number there, we insert the number as we see it, then we would be able to calculate whatever thing is expected of us to calculate. An example is AU4 will be equal to TU4 over Q4. This means that wherever you see N, put 4 in there. As simple as that. We would want to calculate average utility 4. We are representing N with 4. So wherever you see N, put 4 in there. Data will be able to help us understand very well. And so as we proceed, I'll give out examples so that we all, try it on our own. But we should be able to understand these things so that as we are transposing to the data, we wouldn't find so much of, a difficulty over there. The next concept or terminology we want to talk about is terminology number 5, which is marginal utility, represented by MU. Much of economics decisions are centered on the margins or marginals, and so as we proceed, or as you know from our previous discussions, we've talked about marginal cost, we've talked about marginal productivity, we've talked about marginal revenue. Much of economic decisions are centered on the margins, because it is dependent on the margins we'll be able to know whether the producer is making better use of its scarce resources, or the consumer should stop consuming whatever thing he or she is consuming. And so by the theory or the concept of consumer behavior, much discussions, and even on equilibrium, consumer utility or consumer equilibrium, that is utility maximization, much of that decision will be made on marginal utility. Marginal utility is the additional satisfaction a consumer gets from consuming additional units of a commodity. We believe that as the consumer consumes additional unit of a commodity, the marginal utility wouldn't be as earlier as originally when he or she hadn't consumed the commodity. But we believe that as the consumer consumes more and more units of the commodity, the marginal utility is expected or will be seen declining. And so the concept of marginal utility talks about much things about economics. Okay, as I said earlier, marginal utility can also be defined as the extra satisfaction a consumer gets from consuming one extra unit of a commodity. It is calculated as MUN equals TUN minus TUN minus 1 all over QN minus QN minus 1. Generally, we can also write it as MU is equal to delta TU over delta Q. We all know that this is a Greek alphabet known as delta. Actually, it is a capital letter of the Greek alphabet, delta. And this delta represents a change as a result of consuming the second unit of orange and the first unit of orange. We see that there is a change. We would want to measure the utility, the satisfaction, the extra satisfaction the consumer have gotten there, so that we'll be able to make tangible economic decisions. Okay, dependent on this formula, we see that we are seeing our N here again. We shouldn't be afraid by some of these things. Many a times when you write generalized formulas on the board, students tend to panic. This is nothing to be afraid about. All that we are trying to say, or we are trying to tell you better ways of making good use of the formula. And so here, just insert the number you would want to calculate. And assuming you would want to calculate MU1. By MU1, it means since the n's run through, anywhere you see n, put 1 over there. So MU1 will be equal to TU1 minus TU1 minus 1, which is equal to TU0 over Q1 minus Q1 minus 1, which is also Q0. So anytime you would want to calculate marginal utility of the first unit, it means that you need to subtract TU0. This TU0 means that you hadn't consumed anything. It means that I cannot stand here and say, wow, I'm enjoying this jollof, whilst there is no jollof in front of me. So in wanting to know the total utility of the jollof rice, because I'm not eating any jollof rice, we will say that it is equal to 0. So whilst you haven't enjoyed, whilst you haven't consumed anything, you can't say you are deriving or you are receiving some satisfaction from that. Dependent on that, the total utility will be equal to 0. It runs through. The same thing applies to the average utility. The same thing also applies to the marginal utility. Anytime you haven't consumed anything, the marginal utility, the total utility, as well as the average utility will all be equal to 0. Okay, let's move on to another example to further expatiate or elaborate on the formula. Assuming we would want to calculate for MU3. But mind you, there's a caveat over here, or there's a point to note here. The point to note is that here I have assumed that the differences in the quantities is 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. I'm talking about the differences in the quantities. That is how come, I'm using the difference between 1 and 0, yes. And so in jumping to 3, I believe that we are moving from 2 to 3. It is not always that you get the differences to be 1, 1, 1. Other times it can be 2, other times it can be 5, other times it can even be 100. And so you would have to note how the differences in the quantities are so that you'll be able to make tangible economic decisions. And so here, because I'm assuming that the formulas are of the quantities are of a difference of 1, 1, 1, then it means that right from 1 we won't jump to 3, but from 1 we will move to 2, and from 2 we will move to 3. So in calculating the marginal utility of quantity 3, we believe that the individual was from 2 and moved to 3. That means that the total utility at quantity 3 minus the total utility, because we are putting 3 here, 3 minus 1 will be equal to 2 over quantity 3 minus quantity 3 minus 1, which is also quantity 2. I'm taking it again. It is because I am assuming that the differences in the quantities is 1, 1, 1. But let's see, assuming the differences in the quantities is 100, 100, 100, then it means that now instead of the MU1, we are having MU100. And the MU100 will go by TU100 minus TU0, because there wasn't any quantity before the 100. So it presupposes to mean that, yes, it is from 0 and we jumped up to 100. The same thing applies to the denominator, Q100 minus Q0. So from 200 to 300, MU300 will be equal to TU300 minus TU200, because we are moving from 200 to 300, all over Q300 minus Q200. So these are better ways of going about this formula. It isn't anything to panic, or it isn't anything to be afraid. Just consider how it has been done on the board, so that you can use that to answer any question that comes your way. All right, so now the sixth terminology we would want to talk about is disutility, or negative marginal utility. Disutility or negative marginal utility. Sometimes a commodity consumed can give a disutility or a negative marginal utility, and it happens when the consumer has gotten to the point of satiety or the point of saturation. You and I, we can attest to the fact that we have a maximum quantity of a certain commodity that we can consume. Probably I can take, say, 2 balls of kinky, whereas somebody can take, say, 5 balls of kinky, etc. Dependent on my balls. It means that if I, Kofi, is able to take 2 balls of kinky, then it means that I have gotten to the point of saturation, or the point of satiety. And at the point of satiety, it becomes difficult for this consumer who can take a maximum of 2 balls of kinky to be able to consume more. I'll take it again. I'm saying that if somebody can take a maximum of 2 balls of kinky, it becomes difficult for that individual to consume additional balls because he has gotten to the peak, he has gotten to the apex, or he has gotten to the pinnacle. If that is the case, if this consumer dares him or herself to consume additional balls of kinky, there's the tendency that this consumer will put out or will vomit. There's the tendency that this consumer will vomit. There's the tendency that he cannot continue to consume further. There's also the tendency that this consumer will feel some level of uneasiness, and that uneasiness buttresses the point or explains the concept of disutility. Disutility is negative marginal utility. So immediately there is a disutility, no rational consumer would want to operate there. Mind you, consumers consume commodities dependent on the marginal utility, because anytime we equate marginal utility to price, so if the commodity is giving you a disutility, then it means that you are not willing, you are not motivated to spend your last CD or your last peswa on that. So this utility, most consumers will not want to consume that. But sometimes as consumers, we dare ourselves by going the extra mile, and so we also believe that there can be a disutility. So disutility basically is when as a result of consuming extra unit of the commodity, the marginal utility will be negative. And right after negative, it means that no rational consumer would want to consume there. Bringing my lessons to a close, I would want to hit on the last concept, that is the law of diminishing marginal utility. This law is also very phenomenal in explaining the law of demand, or the slope or the nature of the demand curve. The law of diminishing marginal utility explains that all other things being equal, of course, in economics, much emphasis is on this law because we believe that not everything will go the way we expect it to go. And so, all other things being equal, as more and more units of a commodity is consumed, the extra satisfaction diminishes continuously, or the additional satisfaction falls or declines continuously. If that happens, then we believe, or then we see that it is the law of diminishing marginal utility that is operating. I'm saying that the law is used to explain the normal demand curve. In fact, there are 3 major things that are used to explain the normal demand curve. The first one is the law of diminishing marginal utility. The second one is the income and substitution effect. And the third one is the number of consumers of a commodity. And in fact, this is the immediate or one of the phenomenal ones in explaining the law of demand, which says that all other things being equal, as more and more units of a commodity is consumed, the additional satisfaction, and here mind you, the additional satisfaction is the marginal utility, the additional satisfaction diminishes continuously. I want to end here so that the next time we will continue from here. All the best. Enjoy your stay at home. Bye-bye.